After split judgments of the Tribunal, Kogi PDP candidate Musa Wada vows to appeal outcome. Insists Yahya Bello's election is flawed by irregularities. Tonight, we dissect the matter. And it is a new normal for Nigerian elections as INEC releases drastic measures for Nigerian elections amidst the war against coronavirus. Hello everyone and welcome to the program. This is Politics Today live on Channels Television. I'm sure Kimbalo in Lagos. It's going to be a fast-paced one. So let's get strapped and get started. We kick off tonight. For many of you who are wondering how much of stuff you have cancelled in the last few months or refused to do during this pandemic and thinking the forthcoming elections in Nigeria will be affected. Hold your thought for a moment. Elections in Edo and Ondo State won't be postponed. That is for sure. INEC says it will go ahead with planning. Check. Will you go to the polling units to vote? Check. Will there be usual queuing up at the polling units? Check. Then what other changes for us to keep safe during the elections? Wait for it, and everyone. Let me tell you all about that. So the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, today released a guideline for the conduct of elections during the COVID-19 pandemic. The elections at hand are the governorship elections in Edo and Ondo State, holding on September the 19th and October the 10th this year. Apart from the governorship elections, the electoral umpire has also fixed dates for the 4 postponed by-elections in Bayelsa, Imo, and Plateau states, while all the by-elections due during the COVID-19 pandemic will be announced by the commission soon. Part of the guidelines for voters, as you can see there on your screen, will include the provision of infrared thermometers at collation centers, mandatory use of face masks, provision of face masks for all electoral officers, provision of alcohol-based sanitizers at polling units, disinfection of smart card readers after the fingerprint of each voter is read, and it says it will also ensure the enforcement of physical distancing while voluntary COVID-19 testing will be made available for INEC staff. So you can see some of the outline there is so much more about it. It's about 11-page document that INEC released today. Let's get more from INEC quickly. Joining me tonight, or bringing back the INEC Commissioner on Voter Education and Publicity, Mr. Festus Okoye. He joins us via Skype tonight on the program. Thank you so much. And indeed, thank you for sharing that information as you promised on Friday right here on the show. So let's get started. 3 major questions I'd like to ask and clarity for our viewers who watching wherever they may be tonight. First and foremost, if you are a voter and you do not have your face mask, would you be able to vote?
By this new policy and what will be contained in our regulations and guidelines, any voter without a face mask will not be allowed to vote during the election. And even if you have a face mask, when you approach the presiding officer or the assistant presiding officer, one, he or she can ask you to remove your face mask to make sure that the person who has come to vote is the actual voter in the election and the actual person whose photograph has been captured in the voters register. So the policy is without any face mask, you cannot vote in this election.
So it's interesting now. So a lot of people are wondering that how does this also affect the political parties? Before I get into that, so in a sense, if you are at the polling unit and you are there to vote, a lot of people are wondering that if some of these guidelines are not followed, would there be a cancellation of the exercise?
No. We are going to insist that the guidelines and the regulations of the commission must be complied with. And this is the essence of the type of engagement we are going to hold with political parties, with civil society groups and organizations, and with the media to sensitize them on some of these issues and some of these guidelines. And this policy, some of the things in this particular policy will also become, we transmute into our guidelines and into our regulations, and it will also be made available to all the security agencies so that any person who tries to violate the law will have himself or herself to blame, because we are going to have an inner cordon and an outer cordon. And before you get to the inner cordon of the polling unit, we must make sure that you have your face mask on.
So that is largely understandable. So if you go to some banks, to some supermarkets, at least in Lagos where I live, there is, in some of the bigger supermarkets, there are marks on the ground at the entrance, at the pay point, where you have to stand on those marks. Is INEC putting in place infrastructure to ensure that voters stand within these guidelines?
We are putting in all sorts of measures to make sure that people or voters comply with the guidelines that we are going to issue. But one of the things that the commission is trying to work out is to use a small by-election to do a test run of the way voters will comply and the way our staff and officials will respond to some of those challenges, and also to see how the security agencies will assist the voters to make sure that they comply with all the rules and regulations that we are going to churn out going into this particular election. So this is an uncharted territory. It's a novel situation. Most people do not have experience working under this condition. So what we want to do is to make sure that we carry all the stakeholders along, and also to plead with the Nigerian people that it is in our best interest for us to see these elections through and avoid a constitutional crisis.
Two quick questions before we allow you go, because I know it's a holiday. But looking at some of the guidelines that you have, the pre-election and the election and the post-election guidelines for the conducting election in this case. So political parties, a lot of people have fears. Experts are saying, how do you ensure that political parties conducting primaries are going to be conducted in few weeks? How are you going to ensure that they go by the rules, because you are an observer in a primaries, isn't it?
Now, Section 87 of the Electoral Act 2010 as amended has given political parties the right to conduct their party primaries for the purposes of nominating candidates. The only thing is that, one, in conducting their primaries, they must make sure that their primaries are either direct or indirect primaries, and that it conforms to their own party constitution and their own guidelines for conducting party primary elections. We will also interface with them and engage them on the virtues and the beauty of complying with all the protocols, with all the guidelines, and with all the mechanisms that have been put in place by the health authorities to make sure that people are not exposed to risk. So I believe that the political parties, the leaders of political parties are Nigerians and are high officials, and they will make sure that they comply with all the rules and regulations and all the guidelines. But we will be there to monitor the party primaries. And when they go wrong, or when they are doing things that are not in conformity with the established protocols by the health authorities, we will gladly draw their attention to it and get them to comply with some of those protocols and some of those rules and regulations.
So quickly, you're looking at the issue of using more of electronic and digital means in conducting some of your activities. Is that going to affect the election, also the voting process in this period?
No. What we are saying is that in relation to the filing of nominations, that it will be done electronically. In terms of media accreditation and accreditation of domestic election observers, we are going to do it electronically. And then in terms of engagement with political parties, civil society groups, and the media, we may combine both physical means of engagement and the electronic means of engagement. But in terms of the actual voting, we are going to use our smart card readers for the purposes of voting in this particular election. And we are going to also recalibrate our polling units to make sure that they conform to the issue of physical distancing in this election.
So the last one tonight, Mr. Okoye, is going to be about budgeting for your elections. I know that you do your yearly budget for elections, the ones that you have ahead of you. That means you're going to go back to the National Assembly, or how are you going to get more money? Because you're looking at spending more money because of the novel case that you have on hand. Just in 20 seconds, if you may answer that.
The people in charge of budgeting in the commission will take care of that. And the commission, as a commission, is also looking into that question, because definitely the COVID-19 pandemic will affect the budgeting process, and those who are in charge of budgeting will see to it and then work with the relevant authorities to make sure that we get money for this election.
Mr. Festus Okoye, National Commissioner in charge of voter education and publicity at INEC. Many thanks indeed. We'll look at how this pans out if you're going to vote at the election. Let's move straight to our next issue on the program tonight. The Kogi Governorship Election Petition Tribunal sitting over the weekend affirmed the election of the incumbent governor, Yahaya Bello. The petition was filed by Mr. Musa Wada, the candidate of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, in the 2019 election. Well, in a judgment of 2-1 delivered by the chairman of the tribunal, Justice Kashim Kegama, on Saturday, the tribunal held that the petitioner failed to prove the allegations of overvoting, massive thumb printing, voter intimidation, and other electoral malpractices. The tribunal also awarded a cost of 1 million naira to be paid by the petitioners, PDP and Musa Wada, to INEC. Yahaya Bello and APC, who are the respondents in a dissenting judgment, Justice Ohima Obiageli nullified the election of Governor Yahaya Bello and ordered INEC to conduct fresh elections in 7 local government areas where the petitioners proved the allegations of overvoting, thuggery, voter intimidation, massive thumb printing, and other electoral malpractices, where the PDP has described the judgment as an alarming miscarriage of justice, claiming that their candidate Wada laid incontrovertible proofs of electoral manipulations as affirmed by Justice Oyema Obiagbele in his dissenting judgment. The PDP insists that its candidate Musa Wada won the November 2019 governorship election. Let's get some perspectives on this one, everyone. I have joining me from our Abuja studio, Captain Joe Agada, a retired military officer, member of the National Executive Committee of the PDP, and was a PDP state coalition officer at the Kogi governorship election. And we also have, on the APC side, a lawyer and a member of the APC, Mr. Joshua Ehimone. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming tonight on the program. Let me begin with you, Captain Agada. From what you're seeing, it's a majority judgment against a minority judgment. But your party is still insisting there is massive irregularities in at least 7 local governments. How do you hope to prove that at the appeal court?
Thank you, Shew and viewers. Thank you for that question. We are building our appeal at the appeal court based on what we have already laid the foundations at the trial court. There is ample evidence of what we call corrupt practices, which includes violence, voter intimidation, and substantial non-compliance to the Electoral Act. And in doing so, if you put all these 3 together, in the 7 areas that we are challenging, that is Olamaboro local government, Kababunu, Ajakuta, Okene, Okehi, Adavi, you will find out that the word election, as known to law, did not exist in those 7 local governments. And we are sad that the majority judgment did not consider and appreciate the petitioner's plea and went the way it did. But we're also very encouraged and happy because the minority judgment threw up hope for Nigerians and for the judiciary by coming up strong and in very strong terms that indeed the election was marred by violence, which we proved. In proving that we showed violence, the Justice Obiagele was very emphatic in disagreeing with his learned brother, the lead judgment, that you said the petitioner did not prove violence. What can be more violent than helicopters we saw being played in the open court here, flying and shooting at voters with the dead men lying in the pool of their blood? And pictures of dead bodies in Adakolo were shown with their death certificates. And INEC commissioner testifying in a post-mortem report that there were more bullets used in Kogi election than the ballot papers. I do not know what evidence the lead judgment wants us to adduce. And secondly, Section 141 of the electoral enjoins, which the tribunal used, that where knowledge is beyond the competence of a court or a tribunal, expert advice should be sought, and that was why we sought and the tribunal ordered a forensic examiner as an expert to come and look into the electoral materials, principally the voters' register and the ballot papers. and the report was submitted on 22nd. Unfortunately, INEC, even as an umpire, was the first one to cry even more than the bereaved and went to challenge that the tribunal should reverse its order already given after the completion of the order specified in the subpoena, because they had already known the results of the findings.
All right, Captain Agada, let's take a breather. When we come back, we hear from the PDP chieftain and the reaction on what Captain Agada of the PDP is saying, and more on the Kogi governorship tussle. Join us again, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. Let's get back to the conversation over the weekend judgment of the tribunal. It was a 2-1 judgment, but the overall judgment is that the Kogi governor, as his election is affirmed by the tribunal. The PDP candidate, Musa Wada, says is going to appeal it. Tonight we're discussing and dissecting the outcome of that tribunal sitting. Joining me, Captain Agada of the PDP and also Mr. Ehimoni of the APC. Thank you, gentlemen. Let me get your reaction to what Captain Agada said. Mr. Ehimoni, he said, look, that the minority judgment is what is valid. Do you think so?
Well, Sheun, thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity you have given me, Barika de Sala. You must agree with me that election petition matters are fought on the altars of credible and cogent evidence. It goes beyond sentiments and mere allegations. All evidence must be tested openly in court. And to the best of my knowledge, because I was privy to be part of the proceeding as an observer from the beginning to the end, PDP did not do their case substantially. They were not able to prove any case substantially. Now, let us even look at the allegation, which is the basis for the petition. They allege, their allegation can be categorized into 3 major categories. One, substantial non-compliance. Now, another one, corrupt practices. Then that the second respondent, that is Yahaya Adoza Bello, did not score the highest lawful vote. Under substantial non-compliance, they allege overvoting, multiple thumbprinting of a ballot, violence, or intimidation. These are facts that must be proved beyond reasonable doubt. Now, on overvoting, it is surprising to note that the petitioner alleged that there was overvoting in about 724 polling units across 20 local governments. 724 polling units across 20 local governments. During the trial, please, they abandoned their claim in 13 local governments and made an attempt to wriggle around 7 local governments, which he has earlier mentioned. But another surprising thing you must take note of is that even in the 7 local governments, they tried to make comments on, without even proving anything, Okene, Okehi, and Adavi local government, where His Excellency Yahaya Adoza Bello scored over 200,000 votes. No single witness was called to substantiate their claim. The remaining 4 local governments, which is Olamaboro, Lokoja, Kababunu, and Ajakuta local government, they heavily relied on the opinion of an, well, he said he's a forensic expert. But the opinion of a forensic expert and the card reader, and the parameter to assess the validity or otherwise of the exercise that took place in these 4 local governments, or any election for that matter, is by virtue of Section 49 of the Electoral Act, is the voters' register. Though they presented the regional register, but they were not able to substantiate.
All right, Mr. Ayimoni, yeah, so let's get back to Captain Agada. Captain Agada, the premise on the defense is that the judge, the majority judgment said, look, you could not substantiate some of the evidence or some of the claims that you made in court. And that's the same thing that Mr. Ayimoni is saying. How would you react to that?
Yes, Shehu, thank you very much. I'm very happy that my colleague said anything should be substantiated and demonstrated in open court. Learned Justice, Lordship Justice Obiagele said, with all humility, I differ with the lead judge. He said, we are here in this open court. I don't know whether my friend knows whether there are 2 open courts. We demonstrated the video of the helicopter that killed people. We demonstrated video pictures of unarmed uniformed men, fake police and all that in video clips. What is more important, the forensic expert demonstrated how he got at his findings in open court. And with all humility, he challenged, he said, if there is any other contrary view, be it come here and proved. Now, the crux of the matter in the 7 local governments is about manipulation, massive tampering, which is corrupt practice. It was demonstrated in open court, the method and methodology which the forensic expert claimed. And the minority judge said, look, let me use his words, the way he described the evidence of the forensic expert. He said the evidence of the expert was cogent, credible, unbroken, and unflawed. He said under such circumstances, and what is more so, that the 3 councils, INEC, APC, and Abelo's council, were in open court, and they got the report of the expert, and they said cross-examine. And they couldn't. In any case, for fairness and fair hearing, they requested for a stand down, and we gave them 2 days adjournment. The tribunal, gave them 2 days adjournment. They said they want to consult with their own experts and come to cross-examine. When they came back, they couldn't cross-examine the expert witness and abandoned it. So at the point of that, the state of the law is that they have deemed to accept the evidence of the forensic expert. And Justice Obiagele held us. He said in the face of no contrary contradiction, even after the evidence was given, and the result, the summary, before you cut me off, is that in the 7 local governments who are challenging, 239,000 votes were unlawful. You know, in computation of what is a lawful vote to declare a winner, you must excise the unlawful votes from the other votes. And that is all that we're asking the tribunal to do. And Justice Obiagele stated
just a
he
moment.
said there's only one thing for this tribunal. Hold on. There's only one issue for this tribunal to determine. Did Yaya Bello score a lawful of majority votes? Lawful votes. Those 239 votes are unlawful. When you deduct it from the 406, APC has only won 66,000, far below PDP. And we already have our 25% in 17 local governments.
So, Mr. Ayimoni, I'd like you to react to that, to what you've just said now, and quickly too. As it stands right now, the election was not conducted or concluded at the first ballot. It was at the second ballot. So there were some problems. React to what he said.
I'm not aware of that. The election was concluded on the first ballot as it regards the governorship election. If I must react to what he has said, the evidence of the expert witness was largely based on hearsay documents. The expert witness admitted in court that he is not a datilographer. In other words, he does not have the training to read fingerprint. He may be a forensic expert, but he lacks the training to read fingerprints.
All right.
All doctors are doctors, but not all doctors are gynecologists, and not all doctors are ear or throat or eye doctors. You cannot bring an eye doctor to come and take delivery of a woman who is in labor, the job of a gynecologist. So that is what he demonstrated in court.
Mr. Himoni, so we must leave it at that, and we look forward to the appeal and what happens afterwards. Thank you so much, Captain Agada and Mr. Himoni, for your time tonight on the program. But before we go on our programming note tonight, we will be bringing you a documentary on the life of elder statesman and former Federal Commissioner for Information under General Yakubu Gowon, who was appointed in 1975. Chief Edwin Clark, as prominent Nigerians paid tributes to him. The documentary is titled EK, the Quintessential Clark, a 90th Tribute. The documentary will air at 9 p.m. tonight in place of our COVID-19 program. Please stand by for that, everyone, at 9 p.m. tonight. But that's our show for tonight, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm Sean Kimale. Bye-bye.